don't need my surfboard. Okay. Hare Krishna. So today is the day before Nishinga Chaturdasi, Trayodasi. And on this day, is it 1977 or 76? 77 is right. My very dear godbrother Jayananda Prabhu left this world. So since it's the disappearance day of a great Vaishnava, there's one very beautiful song by Narottam Das Thakur that Prabhupada always had us chant on the disappearance days. Jayananda Premadana Karuna Prachur Ino Prabhu Kota Gela Acharya Thakur Kahamoda Swarup Rupa Kaha Sanatan Kahadasa Raghu Nata Patita Bhava Patita Bhava Kahamura Bata Juga Kaha Kavira Eka Kale Gota Gela Gora Natara Pashani Kutivo Mata Anale Pashivo Koranga Gunera Nini Kotagile Pavo Se Sava Sangira Sange Jai Kaila Vira Se Sangana Paya Kande Narothamura sangana paya kande narodamoda paya kande narodamoda je anilo premadana karuna praju eno prabhu kota gela acharya thakur eno prabhu kota gela Jayananda thakur Jayananda thakur Jaya Vaishnava 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 thakur Vaishnava thakur Vaishnava thakur Jaya Vaishnava thakur Jaya Jaya Prabhupada 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 Jaya Prabhupada Jaya Jaya Jayananda 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 Thakur Ananta Gauri Vaishnavrinda ki Jai Nitalila Vishnu Mr. His Divine Grace, the AC Bhakti Vedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada ki Ananda Gauri Vaishnavrinda ki Jai Sadgoswami Prabhu ki Namacharya Sri Haridas Thakur ki Prem Se Kaho Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasati Gaur Bhaktivinoda ki Sri Sri Radha Krishna Gopa Gopi Go Shama Kun Radha Kun Giri Govardhana ki Brajabhumi Vrindavan Dham ki Sri Navadip Mayapur Dham ki Sri Jagannath Puri Dham ki Gangamay Jamunamay ki Srimati Vrindadevi Tulsi Maharani ki Sri Jayananda Prabhu Disappearance Day ki Srila Jayananda Thakur Disappearance Day ki Tai Go Premanandi. All glories to the Assembly. All glories to the Assembly. All glories to the Assembly. All glories to Sri Guru Gauranga. Glories to you, Srila Prabhupada. Our glories to you, Srila Jayananda Thakur. Om Vishnu Vidya Krishna Vishnu Vishnu Bhakti Vedanta Swami Sri Om Ajnanatimirandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chaksurun Militam Jena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namah Sri Chaitanya-manobhistam Sthapitam Jena Bhutale Sayam Rupa Kadamayam Dadati Svapadantikam Aradanastradandan Daividam Yache Puna Puna Srimad Rupa Padambujo Dulisyam Janmadandani Jaya Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Gaur Bhaktarin. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Panchakalpatrubhyascha kripasindhubheva patitanam bhavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo namo namah. So today is that very auspicious day that Jayananda Prabhu left this world. And he was so dear to Srila Prabhupada, and Prabhupada was so dear to him, that Prabhupada made it, he told that every year we must observe Jayananda's disappearance day. And Prabhupada instructed that wherever we have Rath Yatra, then Jayananda's photo has to be on the Rath Yatra cart. I remember some devotee told me that they were having Rath Yatra in, maybe it was Chicago or someplace. And someone came running up to him, you know, some ordinary person, and said, "Who's that in the picture? Who's that in the picture?" Yeah? He said, "Well, it's a great devotee who started Rath Yatra, that's Jayananda." "But what was his name before? What was his name before?" He said, "I think it was Jim Kaur." "He was my neighbor. He was my neighbor." What happened? He was so amazed that everybody loved his next door neighbor so much that they were putting his picture on the Rath Yatra cart for the festival. So anyway, besides talking about Krishna or Lord Chaitanya, our favorite subject is Prabhupada, and after that, second favorite subject is Jayananda. And somehow I was very fortunate to get some association with Jayananda Prabhu, because I was president of Portland Temple, so we used to come all down for Rath Yatra many times. So we got to associate with Jayananda. And when he joined Radha Damodar, sometimes he would come to Portland also. But Jayananda, he started off life very ordinary. He was going to the Ohio State University, you know, in Ohio, which is, you know, in the middle of the United States somewhere, very conservative type place. And but he wasn't satisfied in life. In fact, even though he got a degree in mechanical engineering, at that time that was you could get a very good paying job. He became a taxi driver. And somebody asked him, "You could have gotten a big job." He said, "I didn't like those people with all their ties and suits and you know, drinking and carrying on. I didn't feel fit in with them. So, you know, a taxi cab driver, nobody bothers me. I just get in, take the people where they want to go and drop them off, and nobody bothers me." So he became a taxi cab driver. And one time our very dear godbrother Bhaktisiddhanta Prabhu, who made all these nice displays in Prabhupada's Samadhi Mandir, he was in, just by chance, or by Krishna's arrangement, I guess, he was in Delhi one time, and somehow he ran into this Punjabi fellow. And I don't know how the subject came up, but somehow he started talking about Jayananda. And he mentioned how he went to the Ohio State University. And that Punjabi boy said, "Well, actually, way back in 1960s, I was an exchange student. You know, they had this program, you know, somebody went from one country and another country sent a person to the other country to study. So I was studying at Ohio State University." Yeah. And the person you're talking about sounds like my roommate, because he was always talking about God, and he wanted to find God, and I never saw him drinking. I never saw him, taking dope. I never saw him, chasing after women. He was always talking about God. And Bhaktisiddhanta said, well, his name was Jim Kaur. He said, that's him. He was my roommate. So about all the millions of people in Delhi, somehow Bhaktisiddhanta ran into that person who was a roommate. So we got this little glimpse of his life before he was a devotee. No smoking, no drinking, no playing around. So somehow, I don't know how he ended up in San Francisco from Ohio, but anyway, he became a taxi cab driver in San Francisco. And one day, he saw in the paper, because he was thinking about suicide. I mean, I know myself in my own life. I was thinking, well, I can't, if there's no purpose to this life, then what is the use of all this, Unless I find out there's some purpose. What's the use of going on? Just a big cosmic joke. Why go on with the joke? I'm just going to finish myself off. We were also desperate to know what is the truth. So he was considering, suicide. And then he saw this article, this advertisement newspaper, that this Swami from India was coming to San Francisco. Because from New York, Mukunda and Janaki and Jamuna and Shamsundar, they started a temple in San Francisco. So they wanted Prabhupada to come there to San Francisco. So practically Jayananda was only, what we used in America call, he was the only straight person there. Everybody else had hair down to here and was wearing bells and funny clothes and, and all kinds of crazy things. And I guess Allingan was a little bit straight, but anyway, Allingansburg was there. Anyway, he saw Prabhupada and fell in love at once. And he went back to the temple, he heard Prabhupada's class. Then he started coming every day to Prabhupada's class, and sometimes, because hippies, they stay up late at night, practically. Sometimes he would be the only one there in Prabhupada's class, So gradually, he decided to become a devotee, but Prabhupada told him to keep his job as a taxi cab driver. Because, those days, no job, work. Nobody had work. Nobody had a job, So everybody was just hanging around the storefront, and just nothing to do. And they weren't contributing anything. So Jayananda he lived in the temple, and he would work as a taxi cab driver, and he would give the money to Prabhupada to manage the temple. And somehow or other along the line, he was the first person to give a significant donation, because those days, 5,000 US dollars, that was a lot of money in those days. Now that's like 50 cents, but but he had his life savings, so he gave it to Prabhupada so Prabhupada could print that original Bhagavad Gita as it is, that little light blue Macmillan Bhagavad Gita that was somehow, the one we have now is 1,100 pages, and that was, like maybe 700 pages, so 400 pages were edited out of it. Still, we all became devotees by that book. So, as we heard in the letter, Prabhupada was mentioning, you were the one that gave 5,000, you were the first one to give 5,000 rupees. So Prabhupada always appreciated him like that. So eventually they got the idea that they should do Rath Yatra. At first Rath Yatra was pretty simple, but then Jayananda got into the act. He decided they saw the pictures of the Rath Yatra in Puri. So he decided he's going to make a cart like that. And so then, Prabhupada named San Francisco Temple New Jagannath Puri. So every year Jayananda would make this Rath Yatra cart. And, somehow or other, one devotee went with him, and they drove around all day, different places, and He would see where there was abandoned lumber, and he would see where there was, sometimes they're stringing up electric cables or telephone lines or something, and they had these big wooden spools, no? They're round, like that. So he would see where those were. And then at night, he would go and pick all those things up from Lord Chaitanya's warehouse. So he would use all that lumber, and he made the wheels out of those spools and things. And Jayananda was always so humble. He always felt himself very, very fallen. In fact, whenever Prabhupada would come to San Francisco, he would immediately ask, "Where's Jayananda?" But Jayananda was afraid to come because he was always busy doing service. So I should do some service and, just sit there with Prabhupada. And Prabhupada, no, call him to come. And Prabhupada loved Jayananda very much. He was so humble like that. And he loved prasadam. He personally told me, he came to Portland one time, and he personally told me that, because most of the time when you're sick, they tell you to fast. Yeah? So he told me, instead of fasting, I eat more prasad so the germs will get liberated. That was Jayananda. Worried about the germs getting liberated. And he would engage everyone somehow or another. He would never tolerate criticism of devotee. Somebody started talking bad about a devotee, he was gone. Or if you started praising Jayananda, he was gone. He couldn't tolerate these things. But he knew how to encourage everyone. He would get people, they would just come up, watch, and they're building the cart, and somehow he engaged. Even drunks, he would get them to do something. And one time, there was this big, tall, very skinny hippie boy standing there watching. And Jayananda looked at him and said, "You know how to use a hammer?" He said, "Well, my father has a hammer. I've used it before." "No, come here, help me." He said, I want you to hold this nail very straight while I hit it, huh? Can you do that? So he held the nail and Jayananda smashed it, He said, "Wow, you held it really nicely. You're not a carpenter? You're like professional." "No, I don't really." "No, but you're like professional. Here, now you hit it. I'm going to hold it, you hit it, He said, "Wow, you're just like a professional. Now you try it. Put the nail and you hit it, And then he said, "Do you think you can do this whole line here, nail all these things?" And that was the first devotional service of His Holiness Jayapataka Swami Maharaj. And he would always make sure, because Jayananda loved prasada. I remember one devotee caught him one day, it was Sunday feast, and everybody was taking the feast. And Jayananda, he went into the deity room, and he took all the maha plates, and he walked out the back door of the temple. Somebody spied him, And he came running out and said, "Jayananda, what are you doing?" He said, "Sit down, we're going to enjoy Mahaprasad." He would take all the Mahaprasad. And anybody who worked on his party, he always made sure, even sometimes he would have a cooker at the Rath Yatra building site, and he would cook prasad for the devotees. He was so humble. And he'd always do those services that nobody else wanted to do, He would take out the garbage. Since he was driving a taxi, he knew how to take care of his taxi, so he used to fix up all the temple cars, because in the old days we didn't have any money, so we didn't have new cars. We always had old cars, and old cars means they're always breaking down. So Jayananda was always under the cars, doing all this greasy work, fixing the cars. In fact, one time, I have a godbrother, he told us one time in Jayananda's appearance, he was here in Vrindavan, Jai Rishi Prabhu told us that he was in LA temple, but they're always hearing about this pure devotee there named Jayananda in San Francisco. And he couldn't wait, for Rath Yatra to come, he'd meet a pure devotee, And he was thinking, he kept hearing it, Jayananda's a pure devotee. He said, he went to San Francisco, I'm going to meet a pure devotee. And they had this idea, they had this impeccably starched, pressed dhoti, very neat and perfectly ironed everything, and, perfect tilak, and completely shaved head, and nice sika, and his hand in his bead bag. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, So he came to San Francisco and he walked outside the temple and he saw these legs sticking out underneath the car. Because Jayananda had this wooden platform on roller skates, wheels, and he could roll underneath the car and he could work on the car, So just these legs were sticking out. And he saw Jai Rishi's feet. He said, "Hey Prabhu, can you get me that wrench?" So Jai Rishi gave him the wrench, He said, "Can you get me that?" And then Jayananda rolled himself out from underneath the car, completely black from head to toe. All his white clothes was black. Everything was just filled with grease, hands filled with grease, everything was filled with grease. And Jayananda came out and said, "Prabhu, what's your name?" He said, "Jai Rishi." So Prabhu, what is your name? He said, "I'm Jayananda." This was the pure devotee covered in grease, working underneath the car. That was Jayananda. Then one devotee, some young boy came, wanted to join the temple. So the temple president, I can't remember who it was. I can't remember now. So he said, and you have to do service. He said, "What can I do?" "Well, there's a nice devotee who takes out the trash. He has to take it on a garbage run. So you go outside and help Jayananda." Sent him outside, and they said, "Temple president sent me to help you." So Jayananda started talking to him, and he's just preaching to him. And Jayananda was always so jolly, and he just kept talking about Krishna. And he said, "I like to do the things nobody else likes to do. So I always seen the garbage men taking all the garbage out. So that's what I do. I take out the garbage. Come on, And they got all these bags onto the truck, and they went to the garbage dump and threw everything. And the guy came back and said, "I definitely want to become a devotee. If the garbage man is so happy, I can't imagine about the rest of the devotees." And Jayananda was so humble, He was giving all his salary to the temple. He wasn't, nowadays, if you tell someone to do some service, "Oh, what's the salary? I need a car, I need a laptop, I need an internet connection, I need this." Jayananda didn't take anything from the temple. He did so much service, he never took anything from the temple. So he was wearing these cloth. It was just holes sewed together. It wasn't even cloth, Because he wouldn't buy anything new for himself, And finally the devotees are embarrassed. His pants were full of holes, shirt was full of holes, because he's always working on the cars and everything. So finally the devotees prevailed upon him. You have to go buy a new shirt and pants. And there was a thing in America called the Salvation Army. They were some sort of Christian organization. They got old used clothes and stitched them up and sold them very cheaply. And then in this way they fed all the bums. Well, those days we called them bums, nowadays we call them homeless. But anyway, because there was all these people from Vietnam War, they came back, and now we call it post, something Srindam or something. They couldn't work, They've been in World War II or they've been in Vietnam, and they're just, so they would help these people. So he went there, and he picked out a pair, and you could get a pair of pants for 50 cents and a shirt for a quarter. There's nothing in America. But he thought, this money is Prabhupada's money. How can I do this, So he went in the dressing room, because they always had a dressing room. You can go and pull the curtain and try on the cloth, see if it fits. So he put it on the cloth that he wanted to buy, the shirt and pants, and then he put his old shirt and pants over top, thinking he'll just sneak out of the store like that. But his old cloth was just holes, so everybody could see through what he was doing. So immediately they grabbed him and they called the police, and he was arrested and taken down to the station. Then he gave a day for his court date. So he came for his court date, and the judge said, well, what do you plead, guilty or not guilty? He said, well, I'd like to say something first. He said, all right. The judge said, say it. You see, my whole life is dedicated to God, and everything I do is for Him, and whatever money I have, it all belongs to the temple. It all belongs to God. So Your Honor, I just couldn't do it. I couldn't spend this money on myself. I just couldn't do it, Your Honor. He started crying, I just couldn't spend this money on myself because it's all God's money, I just couldn't do it. And then the policeman was there to be the witness. He said, all right, I'll pay for the clothes. And then the judge went, whack, case dismissed. Another story, one time, after Jayananda, because Jayananda used to go and he would get all the permits for the Rath Yatra from the police and for certain departments of the municipality of San Francisco. He would get all the permits and everything. And Jayananda always took prasad with him wherever he went. He always gave everybody prasad because he knew they're not going to take to Krishna consciousness, but at least they'll get prasadam. And he always told everybody his name was Jayananda. Because he knew they couldn't come say Jayananda, so he was Jayananda. So after Jayananda left, then there was some other devotee who was assigned to get all the permits and everything. And so he went all the different departments, and it finally had to be signed by the mayor. Now at that time, the mayor was a woman. Now this is way back, in the 70s. When, mayor's job, that was a man's domain, So somehow this lady, she was a tough lady. She became the mayor of one of the biggest cities in America. So she had to be tough, to get such a job like that, It wasn't like nowadays, And so she was a very tough woman, very heavy. And she had to sign the papers. And she had worked in the department that gave the permits and everything before. So when he came to get it signed, she said, where's Jayananda? The devotee said, well, he passed away. And this very tough lady, in front of a stranger, she just broke down and began sobbing. Right in front of a stranger, she just broke down and sobbing uncontrollably. That was Jayananda. He touched people like that. And he would go to the produce market, vegetable market. This is all controlled by the Italian mafiosos, they're all tough guys. But somehow, he made friends with them because Jayananda could make friends with anyone, And he'd always give them prasadam. And he told his name was Jayananda, And all these heavy guys, they would always give him, because they would get bananas. They've got little brown spots on them, so they're ready to eat, but no store will buy them because, they have to keep them in the store for a week or so, So they would give, 20 kilo boxes, 5 or 6 20 kilo boxes of bananas. The eggplant's got a little, orange spots on it. They give the whole, you could, pick out the good ones, but they didn't bother. They just give the whole box, Cauliflower's got some black spots. He would get all this stuff donated for the temple. And he'd always give them prasadam. And those who came after Jayananda, they would always say, where's Jayananda? Where's Jayananda? They all loved Jayananda. And I remember one time we came down from Portland. I was temple president. And, because I started out my life as one of my first services was cooking. So, and everybody knew that, I guess on the East Coast it was Narottam was famous as a great cook, and on the West Coast it was Deena Bandhu. So he knew that I was a good cook. So I came down. And in San Francisco Temple, they just bought this big steamer. It had this compartment. you could put 50 kilos of sabji inside, and then lock it. And then there was a second cover down below. You put another 50 kilos. So you could cook, 100 kilos of sabji, 50 of cauliflower, 50 of potatoes at once. It was all steamer because it was all stainless steel, but the steam circulated between the two stainless steel jackets like that. And they had this big, huge tub like that was also a steamer, So Jayananda came up, he put his hand on my shoulder. He said, Prabhu, I heard you're a good cook. You want to cook for the feast tomorrow? And I said, who's going to refuse Jayananda some service, So I said, all right. So there I was, they would bring in the 50 kilos of potatoes, and I put them in the compartment, and 50 kilos of cauliflower, put them in the compartment, and steam them out and pull them out into the big tub, and throw in the sour cream and all the spices and bell peppers and tomatoes and everything, and cook it all down all night. All night I was cooking. So by morning time, I was cooked. And somebody came and said, Jayananda, don't you know he's temple president? I said, no, I'm happy to do some service for Jayananda. There was supposed to be a temple president meeting, but I was cooked. I just went to sleep. But that was Jayananda. And I remember sometimes, somewhere along the line, he joined Radha Damodar Party. They came to Portland. And we used to go way out outside the city. There was a dairy where we get raw cow's milk, And because in the Western world, there's no such thing as buffalo milk. But it's very hard to get really, because they pasteurize it and put fish oil in it for the vitamin D or something. I don't know, there's all kinds of strange stuff. But we would go outside and buy this nice milk. And Jayananda said, since New Vrindavan, this is the best sweet rice I've ever had. And then Jayananda got the idea that we should have Rath Yatra in New York. Why just San Francisco? Let's have the Rath Yatra in New York. So this is 76. Jayananda went to New York. And he convinced everybody that they should do Rath Yatra. And somehow, Tosan Krishna Prabhu, somehow he got permits to go down 5th Avenue, which in the of course we know that Kunjagali is the most important street in the whole world, but anyway, in the material estimation, 5th Avenue is the place, They got permission, So they rented some place, because they needed a place, because New York is all buildings, but there was some place near the railway yards, and they went to the railway and they said, well, we just sold it to some guy named Donald Trump. You'll have to see him. So this is some tiny service, that, whatever you feel about Donald Trump, this is some tiny service that he did. He said, sure, you can use that, I just bought that, but you can use that land, I'm not doing anything with it. So they built the Rath Yatra cart there in Donald Trump's land. And then Jayananda, he had invented this way for the canopy to go up and down, because always you have these telephone wires and so many things. So in Balaram's cart, one night before Rath Yatra, because all the round is apartment buildings, everybody was watching. And it was this one old couple, they were watching. They come out on their balcony and watch. And night before Rath Yatra, they were trying out the Balaram's cart, and they cranked it up, and it went, and all of a sudden this huge wind, because somehow we build all these big skyscraper buildings, but they make the wind do strange things, Now they're beginning to understand. So this huge wind came, funneled down between all the buildings. And the thing toppled over, and all the tubes that they had bent. And even this couple had been watching, they came downstairs, they started crying, because they watched how these boys worked so hard. And Jayananda looked at his crew and he said, we're going to do it. We'll have it ready by tomorrow morning, don't worry. And Jayananda had some more pipes, and they worked all night, and by next morning they had it all ready. And while they were working, then Jayananda wasn't feeling so well. But he never told anybody. He never complained about anything, you know. And one day in the old Brooklyn temple, Jayananda came back late at night, and he was walking down the hall, and he was completely doubled over like this. And that devotee, who later became Keshav Bharati Maharaj, saw him walking like that. And so he came running out of his room, and he said, Jayananda, what's the matter? Jayananda stood up. He said, no, nothing's the matter, nothing's the matter. He said, no, I know what I saw, Jayananda. Tell me what's the matter. Then Jayananda lifted up his kurta. There's all these funny lumps all around his chest and, you know, his belly and his back and everything. He said, what is this? He said, I don't know. He said, Jayananda, this is very serious. He said, look, I want to finish this Rath Yatra, then I'll take care of my body. I want to make this cart, and then I'll do this. So Keshav Bharati made him a deal. All right, I'll keep my mouth shut, but as soon as Rath Yatra is over, then you have to go to the hospital and see what this is all about. So somehow they went through the whole Rath Yatra, and you can see the pictures, Jayananda, you know, chanting on the street, and Prabhupada sitting there. Prabhupada must have been so happy. He started going down Mahatma Gandhi Road with a little tiny Rath, and there he is, Fifth Avenue with his 3 big carts. We can't imagine the ecstasy that Prabhupada must have felt. And they got to Washington Square Park, where they put on the festival and plays and the feast and kirtan and everything. And nobody saw Jayananda anywhere. They're looking all over, where's Jayananda? And finally somebody looked way up inside the canopy. He knew nobody would find him there, so there was these 2 cross beams, and he lay down and went to sleep. You know. So then the next day, Keshav Bharati said, I didn't tell anybody, now you got to go to the doctor. So they went to the hospital, and then he called up Keshav Bharati. They says it's serious, it's leukemia, and they're saying that it's incurable, and I'm going to leave my body soon. Yeah. So I want you to bring a big tray of burfi down to the hospital. And Keshav Bharati, look at this guy who's going to die, and he's just thinking about eating prasad, you know. So I did a big tray of, you know, burfi. And he came to the hospital, and Jayananda was in the room. And Jayananda got a knife somehow, and he had him cut it like this, like this, like this. All little triangle shapes, you know. And then Jayananda, he was on the drip, you know. So he grabbed the little stand, it had wheels. So he got out of bed, he grabbed the stand, he said, come with me. And they went down to the TV room. And Jayananda turned off the TV and started telling, you know, all the patients that were sitting there, you know, about Krishna consciousness. And then he had Keshav Bharati give a lecture. And then after the lecture, he passed out prasadam. And Keshav Bharati was amazed. This guy just got the news he's going to die, and the first thing he does is a preaching program and distribute prasadam. He didn't care about himself, you know. That was Jayananda. So, anyway, he went to Mexico for a while because there was illegal. I mean, in America, with a certain, because they worked, they weren't legal in America because you couldn't make money from the drugs and everything, chemotherapy and all that. So they made it illegal. So he had to go to Mexico, and he was living in LA by that time, and the devotee who went with him. They were in the bus and they're going along, and all of a sudden Jayananda pulls out this big bag, and he opens this up, and he's got all this halava. I said, Prabhu, you want some halava? That was Jayananda. He loved prasadam. Anyway, it didn't work out in Mexico. He came back to LA. And then he decided somehow or other that we're going to have Rath Yatra in LA also. And that was a big controversy because everybody from Laguna Beach, from San Francisco and Portland, everybody on the West Coast, you know, Denver, they would all come out for that Rath Yatra. So San Francisco was Rath Yatra place. He said, no, we're going to do it in LA too. Anyway, he finally convinced everybody. But he couldn't do anything. He was in the end, he was in his wheelchair. And one other thing I would just remember. Somebody, because Jayananda, he was always doing service, and somebody, there's another nice one. Just remember. Anyway, he was always doing service, But somebody asked him, Jayananda Prabhu, how can I advance in Krishna consciousness? He said, I don't know, I'm too busy doing service to think about it. But one time, they moved the temple to Berkeley, and the head pujari, he really wanted Jayananda to do arti. But Jayananda was afraid to go on the altar and be close to the Lord and like that. And he kept telling, no, I got all this grease all over my hands, it doesn't come. I said, no, don't worry about it, don't worry about it. So finally Jayananda agreed, so the day came, and devotee would, the head pujari would always be there. If the pujari was supposed to do arti didn't show up, he was supposed to do it. So it was 5 minutes till, and then Jayananda, Jayananda is coming, and all of a sudden Jayananda comes in, and he shows him this invisible dirt that he can see that's under his finger, against his skin. He said, I washed, I just can't get this dirt out, He said, Prabhu, you're going to have to do it. And he looked at Jayananda and he said, look, I just had to answer the call of nature, and I was really in a hurry. I didn't take a bath yet. I can't go on the altar. You're going to have to do it. Total lie. He outsmarted Jayananda. So Jayananda had to go on the altar, and he just watched. He said, I never saw anybody do artik like that. So anyway, Jayananda somehow he would just get on the phone, he would call his old friends, he would get donations. Somehow he organized the whole thing. And but he was getting sicker. They had a wheelchair. They had to wheel him around in a wheelchair. He was getting sicker and sicker. And everybody knew it was going to come. The end was there soon. And then finally, on this day, this Tridasi day before Nrsimha Chaturdasi, Jayananda, they always had a tape of Prabhupada playing kirtan. And Jayananda was sleeping very peacefully, listening to Prabhupada in his ear. Across the street, you could hear the conch shells blow for Mangalartik. And I guess the sound of the conch shells woke up Jayananda, and he put his ear closer to Prabhupada's tape playing. The old days we had tape recorders, if you know what those are. And suddenly some devotee, some brahmachari, nobody had told him to do it, he just went into the Didi room, got the garland from the day before, Lord Jagannath's garland from the day before, ran across the street, went into the apartment, and just as Jayananda moved his head toward the radio, the tape recorder, he put this garland on Jayananda, and Jayananda Prabhu left this world. So, is Vidya Devi come? Oh, there you are. You want to come and tell some of your memories? Unfortunately, there's getting less and less of us who have memories of Jayananda. Okay, but let Mataji speak. And then
Deena Bandhu's pretty much told all the stories of Jayananda. So please forgive me if some of this is repetitious. I think one of the most amazing things about him is that all of these pastimes from beginning to end as a devotee were only 10 years. So he joined the movement in January 16th, 1967, and he left his body on May 1st, 1977. So within 10 years, all of these pastimes, all of this work was accomplished by just one individual person, completely determined to serve Srila Prabhupada and Srila Prabhupada's movement. In the beginning of the Bhagavad Gita, Prabhupada says in quite a long paragraph, he talks about how important it is that we do not see in designations. We don't think of ourselves as, this or that or the other thing, but rather that we're just spirit soul. And Jayananda was definitely the embodiment of someone who did not consider any designations. As Deena Bandhu said, he went to college in Ohio, and he became an engineer and really just could not perform in that particular position. So he always was doing other kinds of service, and he was attracted to going out to California, where he went and became this taxi cab driver. And so many people met him in his taxi. But he was very much seeking. Soon after he went to San Francisco, there were newspaper articles announcing that Srila Prabhupada, an Indian Swami, was going to come to San Francisco. And he decided that he needed to go and see this person. So he arrived and pretty much knew when he first met Srila Prabhupada that this was his guru, and pretty much never left the temple since then. His first meeting with Srila Prabhupada was when he was 28 years old, and the whole temple was completely filled with hippies, and he looked very different from everyone else because he never was a hippie, really. He just grew up, went to college, and took on this job. So he stood out. He was very tall, and everyone sort of automatically respected him. He listened very intently to the lecture of Srila Prabhupada, and before he left that day, he bought the 3-volume set of Bhagavatams, and Prabhupada signed them. He said, to Shriman Jim Kaur. So he knew he was special. I think when we always hear about great Vaishnavas coming to earth to help us to go back to Godhead, there's always the understanding that some souls choose to come with them. Certainly when Krishna comes to the material world, he brings so many of his associates, so many people who, so many souls who love to serve Krishna, don't want to be separated, so they pray, please may I come to the material world with him, same with Lord Chaitanya. And so also with Prabhupada, I'm sure there were souls that wanted to come. And we saw actually as the initial years with Prabhupada were there, that some devotees, it appeared to be they just didn't want to be on the earth without Prabhupada. So those devotees left early, and Jayananda was one of those. He said the reason that he was able to follow Prabhupada was because he knew from meeting him that Prabhupada would never cheat him. And they had this incredible honesty between them. And as Deena Bandhu told so many stories of how Jayananda never, ever stopped serving from day to night. He had this job driving cab, which he would do, and then give every bit of money he earned to the temple to help them pay their bills. You know, he gave all of his savings to print Nectar of Devotion. He's thanked in the beginning of Nectar of Devotion for his contribution. Many days he was the only person in class in those early days, because everybody would be sleeping in from staying up too late as he spoke. And in February, they didn't say the exact day of 1967, he took the official initiation from Prabhupada. So Prabhupada came January 16th. Jayananda met him perhaps that very first day, and a month and a half later, he was already initiated. So he was moving very fast in his devotional service. His question to Prabhupada was basically, where is God? This is the question he had had his whole life, and was determined to find the answer. If he couldn't find the answer, he didn't want to live. So this was the question of his soul, which was answered so completely by Prabhupada. The famous quote that they always talk about Jayananda as having is Krishna consciousness is so sweet. It's so sweet. And as he was such an incredible cook, even at the time when I was there for his last Rath Yatra in San Francisco, everyone was talking about, don't miss prasadam, Jayananda's cooked it. And it was the most nectarine. In the beginning of the Nectar of Devotion, Prabhupada wrote, I beg to acknowledge with thanks the contribution made by my beloved disciple, Sriman Jayananda Brahmachari. So there he was. At one point, some of the devotees were with Srila Prabhupada, and they were talking with him, and one of the brahmacharis said to Prabhupada, he said, Jayananda is your favorite devotee, right? And Srila Prabhupada stopped for a second and he said, Jayananda is always thinking about me, so I'm always with Jayananda. So in that way, he was always giving examples of really how we could become more Krishna conscious, what kind of consciousness we needed to be developing. He was a pioneer in book distribution. One day, he took the teachings of Lord Chaitanya that had just been printed, and he went out in the day with a bag of books, and he started distributing them. So he was basically the first book distributor in our movement. And then another day, there had been a celebration, a festival at the temple. Prabhupada was there, and Jayananda went out on the street and started clinking his kartals and chanting Hare Krishna, and the first Harinam party started, basically. And Prabhupada was so pleased with that. One time, Prabhupada sent a garland to be given to Jayananda, and he refused to take the garland because he was covered in oil and things from doing the work that he did on the cars. And he said, I can't accept it, I'm too dirty. And Prabhupada said, you may be dirty, but your heart is pure. Please. And he made him take the garland. Hopefully we can have a pure heart like that. Everyone was attracted primarily to his purity. Everyone wanted to talk to him. Everyone wanted his association. And whenever you would come to him, he always had some amazing service that he would do. And the service that he would engage you in is always practical. Jaipataka hammered nails. Other people came. He would always engage them in whatever was going on in the temple, whatever needed to be done. And for him, there was nothing but practical service from the moment he woke up to the moment he took rest, which was very little. And as Deena Bandhu told the story, someone asked him, how do you make advancement in Krishna consciousness? And he said, I don't know, I'm just always working. He said, I haven't had time to think about that. Again, he worked mostly on the West Coast, and then of course came up with the idea that there needed to be Rath Yatra in New York. It was the biggest city pretty much at that time in the world, and he had this image of Jagannath coming down Fifth Avenue in his carts, and even said, this is why Fifth Avenue has been created, for Lord Jagannath to ride down this street. So he went to New York and began the operations that Bandhu so well explained of building this cart. And at that particular point in time, found out that he was ill. Now he started in '67, and this was now in '77. And going to New York, he was able to build these 3 magnificent carts. He'd become so empowered that he was able to build these carts. And by, I think it was in May, I forget what date, in 1976 was the New York Rath Yatra. And he was able to build these carts and have the Rath Yatra in all of its glory. There's beautiful pictures of that Rath Yatra that you can see online. After the New York Rath Yatra, he decided that LA was the next city that should have Rath Yatra, and he went, and so that's where he chose to go. And from a wheelchair, he basically instructed the devotees there to build the 3 Rath carts for the LA Rath Yatra. And he always attended Guru Puj in LA every day, and everyone would become completely enlivened when he'd walk in the room, because he had the capacity by that time. His purity was so palpable that just by entering a room, everybody felt their hearts lifting, and they would be so happy that he would be there. And always as part of the Guru Puj, we all sat at the end and we would say the prayer together, the prayer to the spiritual master. And it would be his voice that everyone could hear above everyone else's. And it was so pure and so beautiful that you really felt the meaning of those words in a way that you had never heard it before. Whenever he had to go to the hospitals, he preached to the doctors. Wherever he went, he was known for telling people about Krishna, giving them information about Krishna, and always trying to distribute prasad and engage them in some kind of service. Shopkeepers all knew him. The people who were delivering things to the temple all knew him and wanted, even were hankering for his association, were hoping to see him at some particular point in time. So everyone in Los Angeles temple was so enlivened that he was a part of their temple, even though they were just getting kind of Jayananda at the very end of his life. And really, we were all so young in Krishna consciousness, nobody was dying. So to have a devotee who was going to leave their body was, quite shocking and difficult for everyone to bear. But everyone was trying to serve him in one way or another. So he basically, just quite a little while before he left his body, he had a birthday. And everyone in Los Angeles wanted to celebrate this birthday. And he was almost actually too ill to be able to come. And still he did, because he always showed up when he was supposed to. And even in his very weakened condition. To see him, you would not have even thought that he was sick. If you'd seen him before, you realized he was shrinking.
They tricked him. They told him, Jayananda Prabhu, we got some problem on the Rath cart, only you can fix it. You have to come and tell us what to do. Because they knew he would never come to a birthday party. They wheeled him out in his wheelchair, and there was a birthday cake like a Rath Yatra.
And that was actually just days before he left his body. So everyone was kind of hoping against hope that Krishna would save him and we would get to keep him in the material world with us. And we were all in Mangal Arti actually at the time. And this devotee, just before Mangal Arti started, he took Jagannath's garland over to Jayananda's room, not knowing anything, but knocked on the door, and the garland was offered just as he left his body. So it was an incredibly glorious 10 years of a devotee's life where he just served incessantly and always practical service. So the most menial things that we do for Krishna are counted just as much as the big and exciting things that we may wish that we can do or that we get to do sometimes. Perhaps we get maybe even more credit for those, because here was someone who did just anything, the needful, just as Prabhupada desired us to do. So, all glories to Jayananda.
So we'd like to thank Vidya Mataji for her wonderful memories. Also, what happened was they tricked him. They told him, you have to come and see what's wrong with the cart. They wheeled him out there. They had a cake in form of a Rath Yatra cart. And then Jayananda, he had no energy at all. And somehow they had invited his mother and father. His mother and father were there. And suddenly he started talking about Rath Yatra and how it's so important for the fallen conditioned souls. We have to do this Rath Yatra all over the world. And suddenly, from nowhere, he got the strength. He pushed himself up and he stood and was just preaching the glories of Rath Yatra, And his parents were standing behind me with tears just pouring down their eyes, And then Jayananda, he collapsed into the cart. If you go on Dandavas, you can see somehow at the end of the article, they have so many pictures from that time. I've never seen pictures of that time. But you can see the Rath Yatra cart cake, and you can see Jayananda's totally wiped out in the wheelchair. One picture you can even see his father. But it was just then he cut up the cake and distributed prasadam to everybody. That was Jayananda. So I'd like to ask Gopal, Prabhu, he has one memory of Jayananda. I was fortunate to get a few, so.
Namo Vishnuvadaya Krishna Vastaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swami Tamani Namaste Saraswati Devi Bhagavani Kacharani Nirvase Sishum Vivadi Raskatri Satani. So, for all of you devotees here, it's difficult for you to understand that at this time, ISKCON was a fledgling society, and it was probably the most exciting time in all of our lives. There were a few temples, not many, 7 or 10 temples around the United States, and then the devotees had gone to England, but there had been plans made to have this festival in San Francisco, Rath Yatra festival, and Srila Prabhupada was going to come to this festival. So for me, I was so excited because this was 1970, but I had waited 2 years to see Prabhupada. And finally, I was going to get this opportunity to see Srila Prabhupada. So we drove to San Francisco, and it was amazing to see so many devotees that had come from all of the temples around the United States, especially because our temple, we had 4 devotees in the temple, but there were so many devotees there, and everyone was busy working on this festival, this Rath Yatra festival, and orchestrating all of the activities that were taking place was His Grace Jayananda Prabhu. And so he would ask you what your skill set were, and then according to that he would engage you in a suitable service. So because I was a cook and I had also carpentry skills, immediately he engaged me in one of these activities. I think I had to cook the sweet rice for the Rath Yatra festival. So normally in the temple we make one small pot of sweet rice because not that many people would come to our Sunday feast. But then we had, on a grand scale, huge pots of milk and different spices and things that we used, and sugar to make the sweet rice. And we would cook all day long. And then when we finished, there would be a mission where we would have to go out, as Deena Bandhu was saying earlier, that building supplies were needed. And so he said, okay, I want you to go here and get these pieces of lumber. Might even have been the wheels that they had used on the carts, but we did that, and we would work tirelessly from early morning until late at night. And this work, it took several days, but the underlining motivation was that Prabhupada was coming. And for many devotees, this was going to be the first time to see Srila Prabhupada. And so I was so excited. And Prabhupada, on the day of the Rath Yatra festival, he came, and originally he was going to ride on the Rath Yatra cart, but there had been some threats from the Black Panthers that they will, cause harm to Srila Prabhupada. So he came by car, and when he alighted from his car, this was my first opportunity to see Prabhupada physically. And he was wearing his saffron dhoti, and it flowed to the ground. And he began looking at Lord Jagannath, and he began dancing. And everybody was saying, Prabhupada's dancing, Prabhupada's dancing. And the Prabhupada shuffle was introduced into our society. And from that day up until now, that was the standard dance that we would do for Prabhupada. But it was, as I said, so exciting to see Srila Prabhupada, knowing that this is a pure devotee. And it brought great thrill. But the construction of the Rath Yatra cart had continued, and as I said, we worked tirelessly day and night. And at one point, myself and one other devotee, Bhakta John from Vancouver, who became Sridhar Swami. We were completely exhausted, and because there were so many devotees, there was no space anywhere for us to rest. So we found a closet, and we went into the closet and we closed the door, and finally we had some solitude and a bit of quietness, and maybe we were able to even sleep a little bit. But out of the blue, someone knocked on the door and opened the door, and it was Jayananda. And I said, oh no, we're busted. And then he could tell that we were exhausted. And then he said, you want some halava? So he had a big bucket of halava, and he was going around giving this halava to all the devotees. But because we were so tired, we politely refused the halava. But the festival continued, and it was a grand success. It was the most spectacular thing that you had ever seen, because he had copied the 3 carts that they had used in Jagannath Puri, and you know, it was very exhilarating. Now, we had these beautiful Jagannath deities, and of course we know the story that they were carved by Shyamasundar Prabhu, and then they were installed onto the Rath Yatra cart, 3 of them, 1 for each Jagannath, Baladeva, and Subhadra. And it was much different, because I had seen the very original first Rath Yatra festival in San Francisco, Golden Gate Park, which was on the back of a pickup. And there, for the first time, I was able to see the deities of Lord Jagannath, Baladeva, and Subhadra. And later, I went to Seattle Temple, and in the Seattle Temple, they had a small set of Jagannath deities, Baladeva, Subhadra, and Balaram. And immediately I could remember the deities from San Francisco, and I saw the devotees in the temple, and I knew that these people are going to start chanting Hare Krishna. And so I was so excited, and then I went to the back of the temple, and I sat down, and as I had expected, they began chanting Hare Krishna, and at the end they distributed prasadam. So these original Jagannath deities, I'm sure they still have in San Francisco. I know I asked the one temple president in Seattle this last time he was visiting, do they still have the original Jagannath deities? So those were the first deities in ISKCON, before Radha Krishna or Gaur Nitai, such as that. We had 2 sets of Jagannath deities, and from those, and by the desires of Jayananda Prabhu, the Rath Yatra experience began to expand from San Francisco to, you said, to New York? Yeah? Okay. But anyway, it was like that, so, you know, it's very rare that one has the opportunity to have association with such great devotees. So, if we can examine the behavior of our God brothers and God sisters, if we can see the determination that was exhibited by Jayananda Prabhu to be diligent and determined to fulfill the wishes of Srila Prabhupada. So that is our life's goal, is to serve. So it says one must approach a bona fide spiritual master and render service to him unconditionally. So this was Jayananda Prabhu's mood. No time for frivolous talk, no time for anything other than fulfilling Srila Prabhupada's desire. So although we didn't know Krishna, but we had Prabhupada. So everything we have now today, even now, we don't know Krishna 100%, but we have Prabhupada, and he is our transparent medium to the Supreme Lord. So devotees like Jayananda Prabhu, very fortunate to have even one moment's association with a pure devotee like this. So, thank you.
Jayananda Prabhu ki jai. Is this peanut butter halwa?
Yeah, peanut butter.
So Jayananda's favorite thing was peanut butter halwa. So we can make 2 lines, 1 line for the ladies, 1 line for the gents, and everybody can give some nice peanut butter halwa.